You, yes, you. Do you want to spend countless hours smashing an axe against a tree? Or perhaps you want to crawl around on your hands and knees picking fiber plants stem by stem? Or maybe the arduous journey of carrying massive logs across a world filled with wolves, undead, and whatever the that is more your speed. Either way, if the thought of finishing work to spend your free time working without pay sounds even remotely appealing, then boy do I have the game for you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Aska.
To start again.
Aska is the latest game to join a seemingly never-ending deluge of slew-slop survival games on Steam. For years, developers have attempted to capitalize on the boom of the survival genre, from indie darlings like 7 Days to Die and Rust, to the behemoths of the genre in Ark Survival Evolved and Conan Exiles, to the more recent smash hits like Valheim and Palworld. But for every one of those releases, there's a dozen Age of Survivals.
No.
Sorry, I don't even know what that bit was for. Hungry hippos aside, so what is Aska, why do you need to know about it, and why do I think it's one of the most refreshing survival games on the market today? While heavily influenced by the survival genre, Aska is more focused on the colony management aspects that puts you in the role of a chieftain of a Viking tribe. Supporting up to 4-player co-op, players will need to carefully manage resources, grow food, hunt animals, and provide safety and security for their villagers. It's easy to assume at first glance Aska is just another survival game, and while it wears its survival inspirations on its sleeves, the key to success is more about efficiency and management. So, how does that all work? Utilising a unique resource, Jotun's Blood, players use Odin's Eye to summon a random NPC to their village. After some time, a new villager arrives complete with their own sets of skills and abilities. Perhaps you find a villager who excels at gathering wood or stone, or maybe you get a fatty that consumes twice as much food as everyone else and constantly breaks shit. Carefully planning and building around your villages is challenging, but as with much of the game, it's incredibly rewarding. When villagers aren't pestering you to make new tools or to increase security, you can assign them to various tasks. Woodcutters, miners, cooks, almost all of the activities required to sustain the village can be heavily automated using in-game instruction tools. The interface is a bit cumbersome and needs some work. You have to go through too many menus to sort of analyze each individual villager, but so far it's a really good foundation and a great system to help automate some of the more tedious elements of survival and colony management. While having NPCs automate tasks isn't unique to the genre, few games have done it before, it really does work as a system that complements the survival aspects of the experience. So for example, early on yourself, you're going around, you're picking berry bushes, trying to get berries, bringing them back, storing them so you've got some food to keep you going. As you get a bit further into the game and you recruit more villagers, you'll assign a villager to go and gather the berries for you, but they're not quite as efficient as normal people, but they can do a good job. As you get more and more villagers, berries enough won't be alone to survive, so you'll need to set up a cooking process. This involves having someone finding the berries, someone else to cook the berries, and then someone at the warehouse to transfer the food to a warehouse system so that it doesn't just sit there and go off. This sort of complicated 2 to 3 step process happens throughout. It's the same for mining and getting metals and woods and that kind of stuff. So you've got the core initial experience of being those survival elements yourself, but then as you sort of progress, the sort of more menial tasks become more automated and you get to go out, explore further and achieve sort of greater things. It's a really unique system in the way it sort of complements the survival aspects, but it's definitely the most defining point of the game and one that's definitely worth diving into. Outside of the colony management and survival aspects of the game, there is a combat system. It's pretty basic, pretty bare bones. You can dodge, you can block, you can heavy attack, you can light attack. There's ranged, melee and two-handed weapons. You can assign villagers to secure certain areas. So if you build a watchtower, for example, there'll be a radius around the watchtower where the assigned villager will protect. This doesn't seem to work 100% at the minute. I'll get into why shortly. But security and looking after your base is quite an important part of the process. The combat's fun. It's very responsive, very quick. So you can get in there, you can hit a couple of hits, block, parry real quick. It is very basic, but it does make it all very familiar, so you can jump straight into the game and immediately know you're going to be able to take care of yourself against most of the basic enemies. Now, that's about as much as I can say in terms of what the game is actually about. Not because I haven't played enough, or because I'm under embargo or restrictions, I just haven't got that far in nearly 25 hours of play. My first playthrough, I think around 12 to 15 hours, ended in complete disaster. While I flourished through the spring, summer and autumn months, I was not prepared for the challenges of winter. I've neglected to set up any sort of clothing manufacturing process, so my villagers and I are all butt naked at this point, standing around in fields at minus 20 degrees. Several of my villagers left the village, just completely abandoned me and disappeared. Another one starved to death, and then a bear attacked. I died, which meant I had to use my soul to take over the body of one of my villagers, which is a really cool but somewhat morbid death mechanic, only for the bear to destroy most of my base anyway. So there I stood, alone, naked and freezing cold in my newly constructed chieftain's hut, firewood running low. It was so cold outside I could barely survive 5 minutes in the weather without freezing to death, and I hadn't prepared enough food to survive the winter. And this is what brings me to the point of why I think Aska is such an important game. Despite not being a survival game at heart, it brings back the risk of survival that modern games all but ignore. The core challenge, man against the elements, is all but a footnote in modern survival games as developers push for more exciting distractions and activities. Taming dinosaurs in Ark, claiming slaves in Conan, most games nowadays lose any survival challenge after the first 45 minutes. Aska maintains that threat, that risk of losing everything consistently. Now, I was playing solo, there's obviously going to be much less challenge for more players, but I rarely felt comfortable, and when I did, something quickly came along and reminded me I was but a guest in these hostile lands. And it was usually that f***ing bear. So let's do a quick breakdown of the pros and cons for both first-time players and survival veterans for Aska. Now, quick note, obviously, this is completely subjective. Some of these things that I don't like, you guys will like, so don't see these as just overall this is bad about the game. This is just where I think most players are going to fall between. So let's dive straight into one of my personal favourite parts of the game. While this may technically lean towards the more negative aspects of grinding for materials in survival games, Aska's construction system offers a communal approach to construction and one that works with either other players or villagers. Each blueprint once built can be tracked, allowing the group to collectively gather, return and install all of the individual pieces. Now alone, this is quite the slog. Picking up big massive logs you can only carry one of, although you can build carts and stuff to help. Solo is very slow and very arduous, whereas if you've got other players or if you've got a villager assigned to building, it just brings a more purpose and collective element to the building system, whereas other games you're just slapping stuff down left, right and centre. This feels a lot more connected with the world around you. Which then brings us to one of the game's cons. Unlike traditional survival games, Aska's construction mechanics feature rigid building blueprints. You don't construct individual walls, doors and windows. Instead, you use prefabricated building blueprints that are constructed identically every single time. This may be appealing for some, but it does drastically limit one of the more creative elements of the typical survival experience. You know, how many videos have you seen of fantastic bases in Rust, Ark, Conan, 7 Days, all with these creative people really giving it their all. None of that here just yet. It might be something we see later, but as of right now, the building in terms of creativity is very flat. Something that sort of adds to that at least a little bit as we move on to the next pro are the building upgrades. Now, most of the buildings in Aska can be upgraded. This serves as both a visual and mechanical purpose. As the building grows in size, it improves various functionalities such as allowing more workers or increasing storage space. There's something really cool about slowly watching your village grow and upgrade over time. It's a real fantastic sight and one I look forward to exploring further as more buildings are introduced and more upgrades are added. Now onto probably my biggest pet hate of the game is the grinding. Now while the grind is very much a core component of the survival genre, more recent games have made great strides in minimizing the more frustrating elements. Little to no building degradation, tools that don't need repairing, fast travel options, all great features in the right games, but they don't fit Aska's goals of an authentic survival experience, which may feel all too familiar and dreary to genre veterans. Now for me, loading up for the first time, once again, finding myself gathering fibre after fibre after fibre, it was not a positive start. It does build into that later. And as I said, it's difficult because the developers are trying to create an experience here, right? And you can't sit there and say, well, I want this if it doesn't fit the experience. But at the same time, I think piling them all on together was a little bit too much for me to begin with. There is a faster travel that I've not spoiled in this video. It's not fast travel, it's definitely quicker. But I just feel like the combination of a lot of the different survival elements being as hardcore as they are does make the game feel unnecessary grindy in places. Then moving on to the final pro here, probably the villager system. While far from flawless, it really rewards players for their ability to min-max tasks and orders, creating efficient supply lines between various structures, ensuring you have the appropriate demand to meet the supply, utilizing villages in areas in which they excel and ignoring their weaknesses. It's a very rewarding system and one that I very much look forward to exploring once it's had a few tweaks. There are some issues right now, you know, despite being surrounded by trees, my lumberjacks wouldn't cut down any wood. Despite being trained on the barracks for days and days at a time, my guy just slept through a bear attack as half my village was slaughtered. So these AI kind of things are always a bit rough to start with, pathing, task prioritization, that kind of stuff. It's a really good start, and it's still one of the game's best systems, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. Then last but not least, probably one of the major cons for me is the difficulty. Now, this is always a controversial topic to bring up. Survival games should be hard, they should be difficult, they should challenge you to survive. But a combination of elements come together to make the difficulty more frustrating than it is challenging. So I've mentioned about assigning the villager to the barracks for several days before the bear attack. He slept through it. The bear destroyed everything. Enemies can destroy structures very easily, and all items stored inside are sometimes lost. Even minor repairs on structures require higher tier resources, creating a lot of unnecessary repetition in a genre already infamous for its resource grind. Repairs should be quick, they should be relatively simple, it shouldn't require the same resources of what you've had. And when structures get destroyed, they get physically destroyed. You start from scratch. You have to pick up all the stuff, put it all back together. It doesn't give you all the resources back either. And if you had stuff stored, as I mentioned before, sometimes these just disappear. This creates a very frustrating experience. When I was out exploring, I was playing the game. I shouldn't be punished for doing that too unnecessarily. I like a bit of difficulty, but sometimes it's a little bit too much. So there we have it, guys. My highs and lows of Aska, with several demos and early access opportunities already have been available. Have you played it? Let me know your thought in the comments. Do you agree with my pros and cons? What do you think is the best and worst thing about the game? And I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care now.